everyone. Welcome back to Typically Unique. I'm Kim Aponte, and I'm here with my husband, Carlos.
Hello. And after the last episode, we kind of introduced some mental health things, and we were looking for some help. And after rewatching that episode, you and I, had a lot of conversation, and we realized how much we just didn't know, and to this day, still don't know.
Right.
So that in turn sparks Kim's curiosity.
We had a lot of questions.
A lot of questions. And when it sparks your curiosity, you go fishing. And Kim went fishing on Google and found some stuff that we want to talk about a little bit today before we continue with the round 5 of the AML treatment.
Right. So I looked up the definition of PDD-NOS. So that's what the diagnosis was that we found out in our last episode. So this is according to Autism Speaks, that website. I figured that was a reliable website to go to. And it says PDD-NOS stands for Pervasive Developmental Disorder Not Otherwise Specified. PDD-NOS was one of several previously separate subtypes of autism that were folded into the single diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder with the publication of the DSM-5 diagnostic manual in 2013. In the past, psychologists and psychiatrists often use the term pervasive developmental disorders and autism spectrum disorders interchangeably. As such, PDD-NOS became the diagnosis applied to children or adults who are on the autism spectrum but do not meet the criteria for another ASD, such as autistic disorder, sometimes called classic autism or Asperger's syndrome. Like all forms of autism, PDD-NOS can occur in conjunction with a wide spectrum of intellectual ability. Its defining features are significant challenges in social and language development. Some developmental health professionals refer to PDD-NOS as sub-threshold autism. In other words, it's the diagnosis they use for someone who has some, but not all characteristics of autism, or who has relatively mild symptoms. For instance, a person may have significant autism symptoms in one core area, such as social deficits, but mild or no symptoms in another core area, such as restricted repetitive behaviors. As a diagnosis, PDD-NOS remains relatively new, dating back only 15 years or so. As a result, some physicians and educators may not be familiar with the term or may use it incorrectly. And then that's where I was going to stop there.
Well, one real quick thing to that I just thought of, but when they say this article was from, or they had this re-diagnosis in 2013, right? That's when they said that was.
Right.
We were in the hospital with Aiden at 13 years old in 2011. So at the point that we got this first diagnosis was prior to this, right?
Prior to them changing it in 2013.
Prior to them changing it. And it was only around since about 1998. Because it was 15 years prior to 2013.
A year after he's born.
He was born, yeah. So do I feel like, hey, maybe we can cut some folks a break because this was relatively new and folks were learning about this? I don't know. But when you just read that there, I was like, wow, that's, right around the time that we got the diagnosis.
Right.
And it was still relatively new. And the funny thing is, at the time, when we got the diagnosis, the PDD-NOS, and that Aiden was on the autism spectrum, I thought those were two totally separate things. Did you, or was it?
I did not. I kind of understood it as a
one and the
spectrum
same
thing. Yeah, and it makes sense now reading this that it's hard to diagnose because it doesn't fit in. Every person's different. Every person presents differently. No one checks all the boxes on a certain list, so it would be hard to catch. And
well, and that's what they said in this, right? Is that they aren't fully autistic,
right?
But they have some symptoms or present in some way on the autism spectrum. So it could be at the very beginning, or or maybe have some traits.
Right. So I read a few different articles and watched some videos, and it seemed like either you would only have some, but not all, or have very mild of everything, or just mild of some. So it could be any combination of that.
So, and I guess, for us, I think in the last episode we were saying we didn't get a plan,
Or an explanation.
But in the last episode, what was the plan? And I think you had mentioned maybe it was just talk therapy. So if someone presents fully as autistic, I'm assuming they have certain things that they would try for that person to make life tolerable and easier for them. Mm-hmm. So you would pick maybe some of those things, right?
Yeah, you would look at where are the deficits.
And
they
what
call
did
them
we
deficits.
see? Yeah, what deficits did we see?
Well, I have a list of them. The deficits we saw were the sensory issues. Limited food choices.
Yes.
But
he wasn't fully autistic because he was good in areas that
he didn't have severe behavior issues if there was a change in schedule. He did not have severe reactions to those kinds of things. He would fixate on some things, but not severely. He just was not. Nothing was severe, and he didn't have a lot.
So he was good at what was he good at?
His strength. Yeah. So Aiden's strengths and things that definitely were not on. Not as part of the list was. He was very smart, very intelligent. He was a problem solver and. Had a great memory. Those were his strengths. But the things we identified were mostly the social aspects.
Which was one little portion of this.
Yeah. They were small and, not a lot. But we'll talk more about that as we get into the traits.
Yeah, let's get into the traits.
Then I looked up, okay, so then what are the symptoms of this? So... make sure I got the right page here. So the traits of a pervasive developmental disorder include problems using and understanding language.
Would we agree to that?
I mean, Aiden had a high vocabulary.
But we had an issue with him when he was very young that only you and I could understand him, and he could only understand, I think, us.
Yes.
Would you agree with that?
Yes. Okay. So he and we talked about that very early on in our episodes, that we identified that right away. We intervened on that right away. We got him right into treatment, and he received speech until like about second grade.
But we didn't know this was because he was on that. Yeah, no. Exactly.
No, because speech can be separate.
Sure.
So you don't know that.
Right.
And with him, it was just the forming of words, just that part of it.
Right.
Difficulty relating to people.
That's pretty broad. Mm-hmm. And I would say some yes.
Right.
Some no.
Right.
He had some friends. And I would also say that Aiden, when he was very young, kindergarten, maybe even preschool, first grade, he was always the peacemaker.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, he was always, why are you sad? Why are you upset? And, he didn't like to see people arguing, and he was somewhat of a peacemaker, right?
Even in third grade, I remember that right before that issue where he got in trouble for not trying a food. That year, though, there was a student in his class, and maybe for a couple years, that he knew that was a student that maybe got in trouble a lot.
Right.
And he just befriended him. He, I don't know, there was something about that other kid that Aiden wanted to just befriend him and
so
I don't know.
The having trouble relating with other people, I think probably didn't rear its head till later because he showed
extreme kindness. He was
Yes,
really looking
yeah.
out for him
Yep.
and showing acts of kindness.
Agreed.
So,
Yep.
so unusual play with toys. So not a lot, but I did catch glimpses of that when he was younger, and it wasn't always. He didn't do it always, but a few times, and I was like, oh my goodness, when I would see that, because that is one of the things on the list that seemed to be very common back in the day that I knew to look out for. So,
and you'd mentioned in an earlier episode too that you caught Aiden one time, instead of playing racing with his cars,
just lining,
he
lining them up.
would just take his Hot Wheels and just line them up, organize them,
And maybe it wasn't always that, but he definitely liked to maybe take a game like Pokemon or something and just kind of do it his way.
Right.
It wasn't always important to play the game the right way, but the way maybe he liked to do it. So.
Exactly. But did anything in your mind really stand out, ripping the head off Barbie dolls or anything?
No.
None of that ever.
No.
There was none of that. So
No.
again, there wouldn't be a red flag, waving in the background or anything. Just a few little things, but
Things that you noticed, but problems with changes in routine. I never really saw that.
Yeah, and
I mean, you talked about he would get upset, like if I didn't read at night, but I don't know if he did that too much.
I think
this one didn't stand out for me.
And I think maybe except for the reading, maybe when he expected something or wanted something, maybe he would be a little frustrated, but we weren't overly regimented. I mean, except for getting up and going to school or work or anything like that. But, we didn't eat dinner exactly at 6 o'clock.
Yeah.
And we didn't always wake up at the exact same time every morning.
No.
And we didn't do anything in particular, like on the weekend that, you know what I mean? It was, so we didn't really
Pretty laid back.
Yeah, pretty laid back. We didn't have a routine that he could, freak out over. And I don't think it bothered him that much either.
No.
So.
Repetitive movements or behavior. So this one showed up later, like maybe fourth, fifth grade.
Yeah.
And the only thing I would notice sometimes is, and I know they call it like echolalic or something like that, where you echo yourself. So sometimes he might say something, and then sometimes he might say something, like you say it kind of back to yourself. I did notice it. It would happen. I don't know. Sometimes it would show up, and sometimes it wouldn't. So I remember talking about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there were 3 things that I remember. One was the repetitive speech. It even got to the point that Carly started doing it.
Yeah.
Right? You remember that? Like, Aiden would say, Carly, stop it. Carly, stop it. And then Carly would be like, Aiden, stop it. Aiden, stop it.
Right? I think because they were just around each other
Exactly.
so much. Yeah.
So I remember that you brought up, and I don't know if this is a repetitive thing, but he would be fixated on chewing on his shirt.
Yeah, and I think that might have been a nervous thing, too.
It could have been.
It could have been like an anxiety type thing, or a way to try to calm
Soothing.
whatever he was feeling, yes, but all of his shirts got chewed up.
Yeah, the front collar was always,
And that's not, I don't know where that would fit on this list of traits, but I've seen, I've had students in class that are on the spectrum, and having toys that they can fidget with or chew on is sometimes I don't know, not a treatment, but a way to
soothing
adapt
exercise.
to that. Yeah.
They're called what?
I couldn't think of the name of it.
Okay, so all right, we'll know in the next episode what those those soothing balls are. But
right.
and then the last thing was that I noticed is he had this. It probably lasted a year, and it drove me crazy. It didn't bother me, but it was like, why is he doing this? But he would do this with his neck.
Oh, yeah.
And he did it for about a year. And I was like, does your neck hurt? Is everything okay? And he's like, no, it's fine, but he would just do this.
And see, that's why it was so hard for us to pick up on things, because some of these behaviors would show up, but then they wouldn't last long. And even when he was doing the echoing thing, like I talked to him about it, and we talked, and I think that helped to recognize it.
That he's doing it.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So deficits in communication and interaction. What are your thoughts on that?
I think, well, first of all, Aiden was very well-spoken, right? He had
very high vocabulary.
Very high vocabulary, very intelligent. And I think in normal circumstances, something that would trigger him, or make him feel uncomfortable. If he was in a comfortable setting, like not the hospital, but if he was in a comfortable setting with his peers, he would have a good time and he would be okay. I think anytime he was out of his element or we went someplace in public, he would be like, he didn't want to be there, would be one of the things. And
maybe we looked at it, and looking back now, we looked at it like he didn't want to be there, but it could have been a change in environment or someplace new that kind of set off some feelings.
Which is,
we don't know.
Which is, and in the last episode, I was talking about everything that I observed, right? From an observation standpoint. But as a parent in that environment, is like, some of it was not really a big deal, and the whole breadth of his childhood didn't center around this stuff. There were moments, but, for the most part, there weren't a lot of those moments. There was just normalcy, and, everybody kind of had their lane, their path, and we all coexisted, and, everything was fine.
But when we say, like when on this list it says deficit in communication, on the surface, you're like, no. But then when you really think deeply about maybe how he might have been feeling, but not expressing.
Yeah.
And maybe that could have been why. I don't know.
Well, and that's a great point too, because, when we try to maybe have those conversations with Aiden, it's not maybe that he didn't want to talk to us about that. I don't know if he had that particular languge to talk to us about it. Plus,
when you're talking about feelings and emotions.
Exactly.
Feelings and emotions, I think, were the issue.
Yeah, 100%, yeah.
So then again, it says restricted or repetitive movements. And the only thing we saw with him was the repeating voices or speech. Making limited eye contact or not making eye contact at all. I don't ever remember noticing anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, he wouldn't stare you down.
Having a hard time expressing feelings or emotions or not understanding the feelings of others. I don't know if I'm remembering this correctly or not, but would he get like kind of overwhelmed, like tear up when an emotion might be happening? Maybe when he was young, I think maybe. I don't know.
Let's hold off. Let's talk about that one for a second. So read that again.
Having a hard time expressing feelings or emotions or not understanding the feelings of others.
So for him, I think, and jump in here, correct me if I'm wrong, for him, he didn't have a lot of emotion if something happened to somebody else. But if it happened to him, he would bawl.
Would feel his own emotions.
He would feel his own emotions. So if he was uncomfortable or if he was scared of something, or he felt he was wronged in some way, he would be crying and he would be very upset. But if we watched a sad movie or if someone in the family got hurt, that would not trigger an emotional response to him. You can tell the story. I certainly won't, but because you experienced the whole thing. Aiden and Carly were playing on the steps, and
oh my gosh, I try not to remember that.
But he didn't really have
not verbally.
Oh, okay, good.
But so what happened? We know what happened. We have to explain what happened. Of course, I was home alone this day because things like this don't happen unless I'm home alone. I was in the kitchen making dinner, which was right around the corner. They were like 3 and 4 years old. They were right around the corner in the hallway, and they were jumping down the steps, but I didn't know that. And they both jumped down at the same time, and I just heard this loud scream, and I went running around there, and it was so disgusting. Carly completely broke her ankle, like completely broke. And I was freaking out. I had to call my mother-in-law. She had to come over because I didn't have a car. And if I couldn't, I had to hold her, and I had both kids. I couldn't drive. I couldn't just throw her in the car and drive. So someone had to come get me. So luckily, we only live 5 minutes down the road from the hospital. So that happened. But yeah, at the time, nothing was really said, as far as feelings or emotions. But she got it all cast. She had to go in for surgery and get it placed and casted. But we set up we had to put her bed downstairs and set up this whole area. And I even have pictures because it was so sweet. But Aiden slept with her that night, and he was, very caring about her. So, yeah. So, we
moments.
saw that too. Yeah. I was just thinking, the image of that is burned into my brain.
Sorry. We didn't know we were going to talk about that.
So bad, yeah. It was bad. Being slow to respond to someone calling out their name or trying to get their attention. Never saw that. So this whole section is about repetitive behavior, engaging in repetitive behaviors such as rocking back and forth or repeating specific words or phrases. So they specifically said that one. So that's pretty telling. Yep. Maintaining a specific routine and becoming upset when there are even slight changes to it.
In the hospital, that was a big one because we had to set up his routine, right? And if the nurses or the doctors came in and went off of that plan, he was it. That was done, So, but that I think was more for his medical care, right?
Yeah, and the comfort of that.
Exactly.
Lessening the anxiety, I think, is what that helped with.
Right.
Having a greater or lesser sensitivity to sensory stimulation, such as noises or lights. That was mostly when he was an infant.
Well, two instances I can think of. The one we talked about very early on when me trying to shave his head. He wanted nothing to do with that. And the man cave was the man cave because he didn't like the lights on in the room. We had to keep the lights off in the man cave at the hospital. So I kind of liked it too. So it worked out good for both of us. But he didn't like, the lights on him and things like that. And
I remember when he was little, like less than a year, maybe between 1 and 2 years old. I think like maybe the vacuum, things like that.
Yeah.
But, having an intense, very focused interest in specific objects or topics. And we've mentioned this before.
That's a big one for him. Mm-hmm. Too many examples to give.
We'll be doing an episode where there's a good one that a topic that he gets interested in.
Yeah.
Developing specific food preferences or refusing to eat certain foods. So all this time that we were complaining about him not having the typical diet and eating habits, it could have just been from this. And that's all.
But how
the
many
time
people?
wasted.
How many people did we tell?
Yeah.
That Aiden would only eat, 5 different types of foods, and maybe that's an exaggeration. 10. you know.
Yeah.
But how many people did we tell along the way? And no one ever referenced autism or PDD-NOS
Right.
or anything like that. And that's a clear sign of that.
Yeah, but you got to put it together with other things too. So I don't know, but when we were in the hospital,
You're making excuses.
no, that's legit.
Okay.
But when we were in the hospital and what we were talking about last episode, and we were telling them all the things, you know, and then this finally
That's
clicks.
when
This when we needed the help. And remind me to talk about that because we might be at the end. I might be able to do it right now.
Squeeze it in. All right.
Yeah. So yeah, that's the list of traits. What did I just say?
Remind you to tell you were going to tell something that you had just remembered.
Now I don't remember.
Well, what about, I think this was a recap of the last episode, right? We did not know what we were going through at the time. We held Aiden to a standard that he probably could not have met.
I know.
Because
it makes me so sad.
I know. And I feel guilt and, I feel bad that I was like, dude, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Why are you doing that?
Yeah.
And, I would try to have heart to hearts or I would, try to say it in a stern way. And it didn't matter, because that's just how he was wired. And we never knew that.
So one of the things that I'm so upset about after, we were expressing our, not anger, but frustration with not getting the plan and not getting the help that we feel we should have in the hospital at that time. Because when I was looking this stuff up over the past couple days, one of the courses of treatment for this is a parent plan. It's to educate the parents because you just have to provide interventions, right? You have to understand what's happening, why it's happening, and then create some interventions that can either ease what they're exhibiting or ease, that result. Just some strategies. You have to come up with strategies that would work. I think we unknowingly did that along the way with things that just made sense. As simple
We came up with our own stuff.
Yeah, we just came up with our own. Like when I noticed him echoing himself, I talked to him about it. I don't know if that's a research-based strategy to bring attention to it so that you don't do it. I don't know that. But if we could have been given that at the time, well, I would have been all over that.
Well, and if someone would have told us, he is not going to eat the foods no matter what you do, we would have got off it, because
Do you know how many family dinners we had that were just arguments about that? Oh my goodness.
We would have got off it. We wouldn't have, try this and do that. And, you're not going to eat tonight if you don't eat what we make, we would have got off that on day one, but we never knew. And in hindsight, I feel bad about that.
Right.
I mean, there's a lot of things about this that in hindsight, I feel bad about.
Mm-hmm. The other big one that I kind of don't feel bad about now is when he would say to me that I hate you and say those harsh things to me. And I wasn't reacting to it and, giving him a consequence and those things. I think truly deep down, I just had this gut feeling that that's coming from somewhere, like I knew he didn't mean it. And yeah, it was awful, but I'm like, gosh, I don't know. So I think that's why I just took it, didn't say anything, hated it, but
maybe that was his stress relief.
Yeah. Right. Maybe that was just the way he expressed, that deep feeling of what he was having. He didn't like, when he was angry or frustrated. Yeah. So, that's how we're feeling right now, looking back on all of this. And This is really helping me. I don't know about you,
Big time.
but there's a lot that has gone on over the years that we're both still trying to make sense of and figure things out. So this is definitely meeting that goal for me, and being very, very helpful. So, we're sharing it with everyone, because I'm sure there's other people out there in the world going through this. So I would love to help somebody early on, not all these years later, like we're going through it. So,
and if somebody knows some tricks of the trade or some
please
anything
leave comments.
About PDD-NOS or on the autism spectrum, and some of the things that we shared, we'd love to hear it. We'd love to hear, how you handled those situations, and maybe what some things we could have tried, and because we want to share that with everybody as well. So
right, please interact with us if you can in the comments, and share this. We're trying to, if it's just for us, it's just for us. We've said that all along the way, but I would like it to reach others that are going through the same thing, but also some experts. I would love it if this came across like some doctors that could give some insight to, with so many of this, with the Brutons, with the AML, with all this stuff.
So if you know somebody, share.
Yeah, please share. Please interact with us in the comments. And our next episode, we're going to talk about our very last round 5 for the AML, and what that was like. So thanks for being with us, and we will see you on the next episode.
Bye.
Bye.